Hello again, folks. How are you guys doing today? So today I'd like to talk about an idea about how to reclaim the West or bring back the West, save the West in essence, right? Because, you know, the West currently is pretty much dead. It's fallen no matter what we do, really. Without something extremely drastic, the entire West is going to collapse, which is why I'm pretty sure none of this is going to work. But it's a nice thought experiment anyways to imagine a way in which we could save the West, right? So, we've built up this wonderful culture the rest of the world wants to, copy and also apparently destroy, and especially destroy the people who made it for whatever reason. But, it is what it is. But we've built up this, extravagant idea that is the West and all of that entails. So before we go forwards, let's describe what the West is. The West is Western Judeo-Christian values. That is, God, country, white men, white women, etc. The idea of the West, imperialism, the rule of strength, exerting your culture across the rest of the world. Like, a lot of the people will say, like, there is no such thing as Western culture, when in reality, most of the world is Western culture. Like, Britain has forced virtually all of the world into Western culture. The reason it's so difficult to define it for most people is the fact that it's everywhere. It's as integral to their societies, even if they're not white Judeo-Christian societies, as breathing. Like, it's so ingrained into most of the planet that finding a place that isn't described as, Western culture is difficult. But it's, basically it's the idea of monarchy, the idea of imperialism, the idea of, oppression. One could say all of that definitely would be elements of what white culture is. Now, you can dislike that, but, at the end of the day, that would be what I would at least describe this whole shenanigan as. So, that's what white culture is, and that's what Western culture is. And just to make it clear, if you're woke or someone on the opposite of Western culture, there's only like 3 potential cultures you can really be from that are major. Like, there's a million different minor tiny ones, but then there's a woke culture, which is just basically anti-white culture. It's just basically racism against white people. That's what woke culture is. And then there's just completely unrelated independent Asiatic cultures that have nothing really to do with modern Western philosophy and thought. You're talking about your China, your places that aren't paused. Like, Japan certainly is, basically just Western culture, but it still has these remnants of greatness from a previous bygone era that I'm sure they look fondly back upon. And those ideas are so powerful and so potent still in their population that people are willing to die for it to protect them. And, just look at the Yamaguchi case, for instance, if you need more. I'm not going to go into that again, but it's beautiful to me, at least. And that's why I'm also so attracted to Asian culture, because Western culture, another thing about Western culture is the values are all derived from the hero's quest. And basically, woke values are derived from nothing except nihilism and Marxism. Period. It's all just Marxism. Like, anti-white hatred in Marxism is everything that's woke. And it's all leads to nihilism, but we'll get into that soon. But the idea about, the West is that it's the hero's quest. And for those of you who aren't aware of the hero's quest for whatever reason, it would be your Tolkien-esque lore, which is based off the Bible, which is all just Judeo-Christian lore, which is slay the dragon, get the girl, right? That's the pinnacle of the hero's quest. And Asian cultures, of course, are based off of a different base story. Their lineage or their idea comes from the coming of age story of a little girl, which is why anime has such a focus on the coming of age of women, for the most part, or little girls. Like, that's their story in the Asian areas. They also focus much more on the youth aspects of everything, especially the youth aspects of their women. For instance, a woman in an Asian country, we'll just say Japan, but a woman in Japan, for instance, that's has her 26th birthday is considered a leftover woman. And where does that term come from? She's also considered a Christmas cake, so we'll go with a few different interpretations. And again, these are translations, but all the Asian cultures have some sort of different way you could phrase this that's equally degrading. But It basically means a woman who's leftover 20 or leftover or at past the age of 26 or 25, right? And why do they call them Christmas cakes? Because you throw out your Christmas cakes on the 26th, right? You eat your Christmas cake on the 25th and then you throw it away on the 26th, which is why they're calling them, Christmas cakes. So that, just to put it into perspective, the difference between the West and the East as far as their ideals. That's just one way of going about it. And anyways, so now this is what we're trying to preserve, right? You can either agree with that or disagree with that. I am neither on the issue. I don't care if it all goes apart, because it'll all mean something gets destructed and something new will come. And frankly, if the, Judeo-Christian values allowed wokeism to come into being and allowed Marxism to come into being, then it might not be worth preserving. If it can survive on its own strength, well, then I'll let it survive. If not, either way. But that's my opinion on it. But how do we save it if we really want to save it? And the answer is, it's going to be something that's far more right-wing even than fascism, just period. And it's going to harken back towards those original Judeo-Christian values and an understanding of them. So, to me at least, fascism is at least somewhat of a left-wing principle. I definitely am far more right-wing on the political spectrum than fascism, so, spoilers, I'm not a Nazi. I could never be anyways, I'm Jewish, but, what I would technically say, this isn't what I believe either, but what I would say is one possible technical solution for the current political climate in the West would be readapting ancient principles like the divine right of kings. And so what exactly is the divine right of kings? So if we're going to talk about a creator in a modern day sense, we're going to have to talk about, the unmoved mover, right? So basically, theoretically, objects at rest stay at rest, objects that are, in motion stay in motion. Therefore, there had to have been something which put everything into motion. Therefore, there is something, realistically beyond at least our understanding, or, the general understanding of the universe, right? You have an unmoved creator, an uncreated creator, etc. Unmoved mover, uncreated creator, whatever you want to call them. And so if we're talking about a divine right of kings in a modern sense, you would have that sort of being. And what could be his teaching that we could understand from looking at the general universe? So the universe doesn't care about us. It's an isolationist universe. And at the end of the day, it's from whatever universe that has been created, it's going to be a survival of the fittest. That's just life and evolution. So if we have an uninterested creator that's trying to, perpetuate a certain system, what sort of system would that creator want? He would want the strongest to rule, or the divine right of kings. And that's how you could arrive at that sort of modern day divine right of kings, right? I'm not saying I agree with this, not saying it's perfect or flawless, but it's one idea on how you could fix the West. And so, what is a divine right of kings, right? Because he has the strength, let's call him, Trumpius Maximus or whatever, because he has the strength to rule. I'm not saying Trump would save the West anyways, I think the exact opposite, but, again, I'm also still voting for him, and you might say, well, why are you voting for someone you don't believe could save the West? And of course, the reason is because I'm indifferent whether or not I want to save the rest. I want to be entertained, and as far as entertainment goes, he is the best pick. So I want 4 more years of entertainment, basically, where everyone is spurging out all the time. That would be my primary reason. But we'll say that let's go back to the divine right of kings before I get too sidetracked and make this a 2-hour-long video. So, for instance, the divine right of kings says that, voting is out of the table, especially, women voting. But, if you want to go along the right-leaning spectrum, you have, Nazis, which are like center-right. You have, why are women voting, which is slightly more to the right than Nazis. You have why are people voting, which is even more to the right than why are women voting. And then you simply have, the divine right of kings, or the strongest strength will rule, and then just primordial truths, or universal truths, which is what I'm trying to get at, or what my real ideas are universal principles that are applicable no matter what the situation is, and are also very interesting. So that's at least where I'm going with that. And so how does basically removing, and let's be clear here, I'm advocating for the removal of all people's right to vote, any sort of decision in the matter, and just raw strength being the ending determiner for the future of the West. And how does that save the West? It removes any sort of, illogical mumbo-jumbo from the current id poll situation. It removes identity politics because your identity doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how much political force and how much violence you can command. And at the end of the day, the government is primarily there to commit violence. That is the job of government. Now, you can disagree with that, but I would say you're wrong. Every single government everywhere's sole purpose is to commit violence. And the strength of that government is strictly determined by how much violence they can commit. And so, and again, you can attack universal suffrage, for instance, very easily. One, men are forced into the draft for our reason to vote. That's how all men in the United States got their right to vote. Was originally it was just supposed to be the landed elite, but then because men volunteered for the draft or to serve the country or to have a stake in the country, then they received the right to vote, and then women received the right to vote for no reason in particular, which doesn't make much sense. It never made much sense, so I'm still not sure why women deserve the right to vote, because realistically they don't. They're not drafted, and when they want to be drafted, then they can, enjoy the right to vote and enjoy dying with the rest of us in, some war, or they can be conscious of objectors, be thrown in jail, and then lose their right to vote when they refuse to. Just saying, that would make the world at least a more fair place. If feminism was about equality, it would start with being equal on that front. But it's not ever about equality, it's about having special treatment, and has been since its inception. That would be first-generation feminism or universal suffrage. So, modernity needs to go. We need to revert back to a primal state of being. Society was progressed and built on monogamy. It was built on man-woman pairings and men going out and producing because they wanted more things for their wife and children. As a man, let me tell you, you can survive with such little, especially in modern day. Like, I live off $700, $800 a month, and the rest I just pocket that I get from my dividends, right? Like, you can survive with almost nothing. Like, almost anything in the world has no impact on the quality of my life, at least through my eyes. Other people might see it differently, but for me as a man, I can survive in a way that most people are not going to be able to, and I should say specifically, most women are never going to be able to do. I'm more extreme than most men are with my minimalism, but at the end of the day, men are much better at minimalism than women. And so, because of this, men naturally should be the ones that are making the decisions about financial aspects about the family. As the patriarch or head of it, they take on the responsibility, and they're the ones who are supposed to sacrifice and suffer to provide for everyone else. Without a system like that, men are disincentivized from producing. And when men are disincentivized from production, you have regression, not progression, which is what the modern state is like. Outside of basically having AIs be able to do work from us, we've seen very little progress, and most of the progress in the world is coming from areas that, still have a monogamous states of relationship. We need to not progress back far enough, though, to where hypergamy or women's natural sexual instincts take over. So there are two harmful natural sexual instincts that exist. That's women, it's hypergamy, or constantly wanting to marry up, to monkey branch, which is basically like leaving their current mate for a better one, right? They're a monkey going from a lower branch to a higher branch. That's where the expression comes from. And then for men, it's obviously the R word, or grape. I'm sure you can figure out what I mean from that. And those are like harmful sexual behaviors, right? So when you take, for instance, man in its primal state, he uses force to achieve what he wants, or the, reproduction. And because we are repressing men at, a much higher level than primality, but we're letting women run free with their hypergamy, or their lowest sexual instinct, we are, in fact, destroying the balance of society and destroying any potential progress, which, again, one of the solutions to that is the divine right of kings. At that point, it's out of the people's hands, and a lot of the things correct itself when simply strength takes over rather than weakness. When men of conviction are, politically dominant and leading the world, instead of what we have today, which is 500 bureaucrats all shuffling about doing nothing and being hypocritical at best and malicious most of the time anyways, not to mention corrupt. And the Marxist destruction of the family, as Engels wrote, has completely destroyed any sort of progress in society and basically dumbed us down to apes that think only about, our lower virtues, and has destroyed any sort of motivation and that destruction and that nihilism that's inherent in Marxism is a feature, not a bug of Marxism. You actually can't sort of chase this praxis or chase any of the Marxist views, praxis being the ideal society, in case you were wondering, without it decaying down into some degenerate form of matter, which is what we currently have. There's nothing to strive for in the rest. There's no reward, no closure, no point, and that is the end point of Marxism, is, there is nothing to strive for. And when there's nothing to strive for, you have no progress that will ever be made. And, oh god, I've got to wrap this up before I go on to like a half an hour long video. But anyways, the solution is the divine right of kings. It's, a god, and which is just, in this case, an unmoved mover who has set up the universe in a way where through evolution, natural selection, you have strength being the primary thing that should dictate society. And then, because the supreme being, whichever he is, whatever it is, has set up the universe in that way, even if it's a simulation, press the power button in whatever way that is the way we should be leading. And because we are not, we have fallen out of Western values, we have embraced Marxism, we have decayed. So the easiest solution would be to go so far right that we would revert back to an idea which captivated the world for the longest time. Sadly, I don't see it happening. There's virtually no way we go back X amount of 100 years to be able to reclaim, our society, and it'll probably just die anyways, but at least it'll be a for fun ride. I know I cut this kind of short, and I could expand upon a lot of other things, but I doubt anyone wants to watch like a 2-hour long video where I just rant about Marxism again. So, thank you for listening, and you have as good a day as you can.